The Milky Way nebula starts to form. Galaxies may form from accumulation of light particles and from the collision of two or more galaxies. If a galaxy is viewed as an exponential accumulation of light particles starting from a single light particle up until 500 billion stars, only in the last 16% of that time would a galaxy have enough matter for even a single star. The first star in the Milky Way galaxy forms. Stars may form from the accumulation of matter or from collisions of two or more large bodies. As time goes by, less collisions occur around a star because most smaller objects are absorbed by the star and planets. Stars and planets may have centers of densely packed, unmoving light particles. The less dense and colder areas near the surface of planets and stars may allow atoms and molecules to form and stay together. Many light particles must move through the internal maze of matter inside planets and stars to eventually reach the surface and escape into empty space. Living objects in the Milky Way galaxy reach another star using a ship, perhaps 5 billion years after the first stars formed. The first globular cluster of 100,000 stars forms in the Milky Way galaxy. The star the Earth orbits forms. Planets form around our star from many collisions. Like the star, they are red hot with liquid rock and metals on the surface. Lighter atoms move to the surface of the planets. Larger planets are surrounded by gas. As the number of collisions decreases and smaller objects are absorbed by the star and planets, the average temperature of the star system is lowered. As the temperature of the planets and moons decreases, their surfaces solidify, and water and other molecules condense at the surface. Perhaps most outer planets are larger because their orbit covers a larger space which includes more matter. The moon of Earth is captured. The moon of Earth may form as a planet that is captured by the Earth, or a planet that collides with the Earth and then reforms from the remaining matter of the collision, or forms in orbit of the Earth at the same time the Earth forms. Planet Earth cools. Molten liquid rock turns into a solid crust. Water condenses and falls to the surface, filling the lowest parts of the land to make the first Earth oceans, lakes, and rivers. The start of the Precambrian and Hadean eon. Larger molecules form on Earth, like amino acids, phosphates, and sugars, the components of living objects. These molecules are made in the oceans, fresh water, and atmosphere of Earth and other planets by lightning, from light particles with high frequency from the sun and around ocean floor volcanoes. The initial building blocks of living objects are easily formed, but assembling them into longer chain molecules or polymers is more difficult. Amino acids link up to form polymers called proteins. Simple fatty acids plus alcohols link up to form lipids, oils and fats. Simple sugars like glucose and sucrose link together to form complex carbohydrates and starches. And finally, the nucleotide bases plus phosphates and sugars link up to form nucleic acids, the genetic code of organisms known as RNA and DNA. Perhaps all proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, and DNA are strictly the products of living objects, while RNA can assemble without the help of any living objects. Nucleic acids form on Earth. Ribonucleic acid, RNA, may be the first nucleic acid to form. One of these RNA molecules may be the ancestor of all of life on Earth. The first proteins on Earth. Transfer RNA molecules evolve, tRNA, and link amino acids into proteins using other RNA molecules, messenger or mRNA, as a template. This protein assembly system is the main system responsible for all the proteins on Earth. Part of each tRNA molecule bonds with a specific amino acid, while another part has a 3-nucleotide sequence that bonds with an opposite matching 3-nucleotide sequence on an mRNA molecule. Perhaps this system, where tRNA molecules build proteins directly from free-floating RNA strands, evolves before the first ribosome in the first cell. A protein can copy RNA. This protein is called an RNA polymerase. For the first time, a nucleic acid functions both as a template for building proteins with the help of tRNA molecules and also as a template for building other nucleic acid molecules. An RNA polymerase must be one of the first useful proteins to be assembled by the early, presumably precellular protein production system. Eventually, an RNA strand that codes for the RNA polymerase and the tRNA needed to make the polymerase may be copied many times. The ribosome evolves. The first ribosomal RNA, rRNA. The ribosome may function as a protocell, providing a platform for more efficient protein production. A single RNA may contain all the instructions needed to make more polymerase, tRNA, and ribosomes. Alternatively, the first ribosome may not evolve until after the first cell. All cells contain ribosomes. Ribosomes are the cellular organelles that carry out protein synthesis through a process called translation. These molecular machines are responsible for accurately translating the linear genetic code on the messenger RNA, mRNA, into a linear sequence of amino acids to produce a protein. The first deoxyribonucleic acid, DNA molecule. A protein evolves that allows the assembly of DNA from RNA, a ribonucleotide reductase. This protein changes ribonucleotides into deoxyribonucleotides, which can then be assembled into the first DNA molecules on Earth. DNA has the advantage of being more stable than RNA and can hold together in longer strands. Longer strands allow for a more complex organism. A protein can copy DNA molecules, a DNA polymerase. Transcription evolves. A protein, an RNA polymerase, assembles RNA from DNA. The first cell on Earth evolves. This is the first prokaryotic cell and first bacterium. DNA is surrounded by a membrane of proteins made by ribosomes, the first cytoplasm. This cell may form in either fresh or salt water, near the sunlit water surface, or near underwater volcanoes on the ocean floor. The DNA of this cell is a template containing the code for a copying molecule, DNA polymerase, and the necessary mRNA, tRNA, and rRNA molecules needed to build the cytoplasm. For the first time, ribosomes and DNA build cell structure. DNA protected by cytoplasm is more likely to survive and be copied. This is the start of binary cell division. DNA polymerase duplicates DNA within the cell, and then the cell divides into two parts. A system of division may evolve in which the original and the newly synthesized copy of DNA are each attached to the cytoplasm so that as the cell grows, the two copies of DNA can be separated and the growing mass can eventually divide into two cells. This is also the start of passive transport. Amino acids, nucleotides, water, and other molecules enter and exit the cytoplasm only because of a difference in concentration from inside and outside the cell. This represents the beginnings of the first digestive system. This cell structure forms the basis of all future cells of every living object on Earth. These first cells are probably anaerobic or anoxygenic, do not require free oxygen, and are heterotrophic, meaning that they do not make their own food, amino acids, nucleotides, phosphates, and sugars, but instead depend on obtaining these molecules from external sources. Cells make the first lipids on Earth, fats, oils, and waxes, by making proteins that can assemble lipids. A phospholipid bilayer evolves around the cell, providing added protection from the external environment. All extant cells have this phospholipid bilayer. When phospholipids are added to water, they self-assemble into double-layered aggregates or bilayers, with the phosphate part of the molecule on the outside and the fatty acid tail part on the inside. Possibly DNA that is connected in a circle allows the DNA polymerase to make continuous copies of the cell, which may increase the speed of cell growth, duplication, and division. As far as is known, bacteria do not die from old age, but if a mutation stops them from dividing, then they die. Bacteria can also die from physical destruction, in addition to lack of food and water. Operins evolve. An operin is a sequence of DNA which a protein binds with in order to block RNA polymerase from building an mRNA molecule from part of the sequence which would be translated into a protein. Operins allow a bacterium to produce certain proteins only when necessary. Bacteria before now can only build a constant stream of all proteins encoded in their DNA. Facilitated diffusion evolves. Proteins in the cell membrane allow only certain molecules to enter the cell. Facilitated diffusion is passive transport aided by proteins. Cellular respiration. Glycolysis evolves in the cytoplasm. Cells can now make ATP, adenosine triphosphate, by converting glucose into pyruvate. This is the beginning of cellular respiration, how cells convert food into ATP and waste products. ATP is the molecule that drives most cellular work. That glycolysis is the most widespread metabolic pathway, that it occurs in the cytoplasm, not in an organelle, and that it is the first stage in fermentation all imply an ancient origin. Fermentation evolves in the cell cytoplasm. Cells can make lactic acid. These cells, which are anaerobic, can now convert pyruvate, the final product of glycolysis, into lactate, an ionized form of lactic acid, and in the process refuel glycolysis and the production of ATP molecules. A second kind of fermentation evolves in the cytoplasm. Cells, all anaerobic, can now convert pyruvate, the final product of glycolysis, into ethanol. Active transport evolves. Proteins and ATP are used to transport molecules into and out of the cytoplasm. Active transport enables a cell to maintain internal concentrations of small molecules that differ from the cell's surroundings. The prokaryote flagellum evolves. Prokaryote cells now have more mobility and can make more choices about their location. The archaea, also called archaebacteria, evolve according to genetic comparison. The phylum Nanoarchaeota. Eubacteria and archaea are the two major lines of prokaryotes. Archaea have a variety of shapes, including spherical, rod-like, and spiral forms. The eubacteria hyperthermophiles evolve. Aquifex and Thermatoga are the only two major genera of eubacteria that are hyperthermophiles. They grow best in an environment that is around 80 degrees Celsius, 176 degrees Fahrenheit. The archaea phylum Crenarchaeota, the ancestor of Cephalobus. The Crenarchaea include many organisms that are extremely thermophilic, heat-loving, and cryophilic, cold-loving. The archaea phylum Euryarchaeota evolve, the ancestor of methanogens and halobacteria, the earliest cell response to light. The Euryarchaeota are composed of two classes, methanogens, which produce methane and are often found in intestines and sewage, and the halobacteria, which survive in high concentrations of salt. Some halobacteria use sensory rhodopsin, a pigment sensitive to red light, for phototaxis, positive or negative movement along a light gradient or vector. The first autotrophic cells, cells that can produce some of their own food. Autotrophs produce their own sugars, lipids, and amino acids. There are only two kinds of autotrophs, chemoautotrophs and photoautotrophs. Chemoautotrophs use chemical nutrients to synthesize carbohydrates, while photoautotrophs use light to synthesize carbohydrates. This is a chemoautotrophic cell. Genes and metabolic sequences suggest that chemoautotrophs evolved before photoautotrophs. Photosynthesis evolves. Anaerobic bacteria use light particles to convert carbon dioxide gas and an electron donor, also called a reductant like hydrogen sulfide, into glucose, water, and sulfur. This process of moving carbon from carbon dioxide gas to the hydrocarbon molecule glucose is called carbon fixation. This is the ancestor of photosystem 1. This system of photosynthesis does not liberate oxygen. Photosynthesis photosystem 2 evolves. Cells with this system emit free oxygen. Anaerobic bacteria use light particles to convert carbon dioxide gas and water into glucose, releasing oxygen gas in the process. This is the main system responsible for producing the oxygen now in the air of Earth. The end of the Hadean and start of the Archean eon. Filamentous multicellularity evolves in prokaryotes. Photosynthetic bacteria grow in filaments. Cells stay fastened together after cell division. Multicellularity appears to have evolved independently multiple times in the history of life on Earth. With multicellularity comes the evolution of differentiation, cells with different functions. Cell differentiation evolves in filamentous prokaryotes, creating organisms with different kinds of cells. One early cell differentiation is that only the cell at the tip of the filament can divide, while the older cells below the tip do not divide. Multicellular organisms can die from aging, a series of cell differentiations that ultimately result in the inability for the multicellular body to continue functioning and to decay. Nitrogen fixation evolves. Cells can make nitrogen compounds like ammonia from nitrogen gas in the air. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria play an important role in allowing plants to obtain nitrogen from nitrogen gas in the air. Nitrogen is needed to make proteins and nucleic acids. Aerobic cellular respiration evolves. The first aerobic or oxygenic cell. These cells use oxygen to convert glucose into carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. Aerobic cellular respiration evolves as an alternative to fermentation by using oxygen to break down the product of glycolysis, pyruvate, into carbon dioxide and water, producing up to 38 ATP molecules in the process. The oldest physical evidence for life, the ratio of carbon-13 to carbon-12 in grains of ancient apatite, which are calcium phosphate minerals. Life uses the lighter carbon-12 isotope, and so the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-13 is different from a non-living source, such as calcium carbonate or limestone. The oldest sediment, the Banded Iron Formation, begins. Banded Iron Formation is sedimentary rock that spans from 3.8 to 1.8 billion years ago, made of iron-rich silicates like silicon dioxide with alternating layers of black-colored reduced or ferrous iron and red-colored oxidized or ferric iron. These alternating layers represent a seasonal cycle where the quantity of free oxygen in the ocean rises and falls, possibly linked to photosynthetic organisms. The atmosphere of Earth still has only small amounts of oxygen at this time. The oldest fossil evidence of life, stromatolites. Stromatolites made by photosynthetic bacteria are found in both Western Australia and South Africa. The oldest fossils of an organism and the oldest prokaryote and bacteria fossils. The organism is similar to cyanobacteria and is found in 3,500 million-year-old chert, sedimentary rock made of silica, in Australia and South Africa. 2.8 billion years will pass before the first animal evolves. The earliest fossils of coccoid, spherical bacteria. The earliest fossil evidence of prokaryote reproduction by budding. Like binary division, budding is a form of asexual reproduction. However, with budding, a new individual develops from a certain point of the parent organism. The new individual may separate to exist independently, or the buds may remain attached, forming colonies. The earliest archaea fossils. The earliest acritarch fossils, unicellular microfossils with uncertain affinity. These acritarchs are also the earliest possible eukaryote fossils. Acritarchs appear to be phytoplankton, freely floating microscopic algae that grow thick coverings during a resting stage in their life cycle. Some resemble the resting stage of modern marine algae known as dinoflagellates. The eubacteria phylum Firmicutes evolves. Gram-positive bacteria, the cause of botulism, tetanus, and anthrax. Firmicutes is a phylum of non-photosynthetic, mainly gram-positive bacteria. Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes are the two main groups of bacteria found in the intestine. Firmicutes includes rods and cocciforms, and some form endospores. An endospore is a tough, reduced, dry form of a bacterium triggered by a lack of nutrients that protects the bacterium and allows it to be revived after long periods of time. The eubacteria phylum Proteobacteria evolves. Includes Rickettsia, the ancestor of all mitochondria, gonorrhea, salmonella, and Escherichia coli, or E. coli. The proteobacteria are the largest group of bacteria by far in terms of number of described species. Gender and sex conjugation evolve in Escherichia coli bacteria. Conjugation is the exchange of DNA plasmids by a donor male bacterium through a pilus to a recipient female bacterium. In addition to pili and conjugation, proteins that can cut DNA and other proteins that can connect two strands of DNA evolve. The first virus evolves. These cells depend on the DNA duplicating and protein production systems of other cells to reproduce themselves. The first viruses may be made from bacteria or may be bacteria initially. The eubacteria phylum Planktomycetes evolves, also known as planktobacteria. Planktomycetes are a widely distributed group of eubacteria that reproduce by budding, have cell walls that do not contain peptidoglycan like most bacteria, and some have a membrane-bound nucleoid similar to the eukaryotic nucleus. The eubacteria phylum Actinobacteria evolves, the source of streptomycin and the cause of tuberculosis and leprosy. The actinobacteria are a group of gram-positive bacteria that are rod-shaped or form branching filaments and include many soil bacteria. The eubacteria phylum Spirochetes evolves. Spirochetes are helical heterotrophs that spiral through their environment by rotating internal flagellum-like filaments. The eubacteria phylum Bacteroidetes evolves. Bacteroidetes is composed of gram-stain-negative, rod-shaped, mostly anaerobic, non-spore-forming bacteria that are widely distributed in the environment, including in soil, seawater, and in the guts and on the skin of animals. The eubacteria phylum Chlamydiae evolves. Chlamydiae are parasites that can survive only within animal cells. One species, Chlamydia trachomatis, is the most common cause of blindness on Earth and also causes a common sexually transmitted disease. The eubacteria phylum Chlorobi evolves. Green sulfur bacteria. Chlorobi are obligately anoxygenic, cannot survive in the presence of oxygen, photosynthesizing bacteria that fix carbon from carbon dioxide into carbon compounds for cell growth by using sulfur compounds, hydrogen, or ferrous iron as electron donors, oxidizing them. The eubacteria phylum Verrucomicrobia evolves. Verrucomicrobia are found in soil, fresh and marine waters, and hot springs. Like planktomycetes, some members of Verrucomicrobia also have intracellular membrane-enclosed compartments, including a membrane that encloses the DNA. Endo and exocytosis evolve. Cells can now eat other cells. Endocytosis is a process of cellular ingestion by which the plasma membrane folds inward to bring substances into the cell. Exocytosis is a process of cellular secretion or excretion in which substances contained in vesicles are released from the cell by fusion of the vesicle membrane with the outer cell membrane. The eukaryotic cell evolves. The first cell with a nucleus. The first protist. The nucleus may develop from the infolding of plasma membrane. There are some differences between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. In prokaryotic cells, the DNA is concentrated in a region that is not membrane enclosed called the nucleoid, while in eukaryotic cells, most of the DNA is contained in a nucleus that is bounded by a double membrane. Eukaryotic cells are generally much larger than prokaryotic cells. Typical bacteria are between 1 and 5 micrometers in diameter, while eukaryotic cells are typically 10 to 100 micrometers in diameter. Unlike prokaryotic cells, eukaryotic cells have a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton enables eukaryotic cells to change their shape and to surround and engulf other cells. Eukaryotic cells also have internal structures that prokaryotic cells lack, such as mitochondria and plastids. DNA in prokaryotic cells is usually in the form of a single circular chromosome, while DNA in the nucleus of eukaryotes contains linear chromosomes. Some organelles in eukaryotes also contain DNA. Most mitochondrial and chloroplast DNA is also circular, reflecting their prokaryote origin. Like prokaryotes, this cell is probably haploid, has a single unique DNA. Most eukaryotes are diploid, have two sets of DNA. All protist, fungi, animal, and plant cells descend from this common eukaryotic cell. The earliest molecular fossil evidence of eukaryotes, styrene molecules. Styrenes are formed by styrols, molecules made by mitochondria. The endoplasmic reticulum evolves in a eukaryote cell. The endoplasmic reticulum, or ER, is a membrane system that extends from the nucleus, important in the synthesis of proteins and lipids. The cytoskeleton forms in the eukaryote cytoplasm. The eukaryote flagellum and cilia evolve. The eukaryote flagellum and cilia are structurally the same but are very different from the prokaryote flagellum. The eukaryote flagellum is composed of a characteristic 9+2 arrangement of microtubules surrounded by a sheath which is an extension of the plasma membrane. Unlike the prokaryote flagella that rotate, the flagella and cilia of eukaryotic cells undulate in a wave-like motion to propel the cell. Some cilia are non-motile and serve as signal-receiving antennae for the cell. The sperm cells of algae, animals, and some plants have flagella. The circular chromosome in the eukaryote nucleus changes into linear chromosomes. Alternatively, the eukaryotic cell may descend from a prokaryote that already has linear DNA. Some extant prokaryotes have a linear chromosome. Histones evolve. Histones are proteins found in all eukaryotic cell nuclei that package and order a single continuous DNA molecule into structural units called nucleosomes. The nucleosomes are coiled into a 30 nanometer fiber called a chromatin and then looped again around a chromosome scaffold into a larger 300 nanometer fiber which forms one of the two chromatids in a chromosome. The eukaryote cell evolves two intermediate stages between cell division and DNA synthesis. In prokaryotes, DNA synthesis takes place uninterrupted between cell divisions, but eukaryotes duplicate their DNA exactly once during a discrete period between cell divisions. The eukaryote Golgi apparatus evolves. The Golgi apparatus packages proteins and lipids into vesicles for delivery to targeted destinations. The nucleolus evolves. The nucleolus is a sphere in the nucleus that makes ribosomal RNA. Mitosis evolves in eukaryote cells. Mitosis is the process in eukaryotic cell division in which the duplicated chromosomes are separated and the nucleus divides, resulting in two new nuclei, each of which contains an identical copy of the parental chromosomes. Mitosis is usually immediately followed by cytokinesis, the division of the cytoplasm. Mitosis is thought to have evolved from prokaryote binary fission, and possible intermediate stages can be seen in some protists. Eukaryote sex evolves. This is the first diploid cell and first zygote. Because of sex, two cells with different DNA can mix, providing more genetic variety. Having two chromosome sets also provides a backup copy of important genes. Eukaryotic sexual reproduction, which is initially the fusion of two cells and their nuclei, may first occur in a single-cell protist that usually reproduces asexually by mitosis. Two haploid eukaryotic cells, gametes, cells with one set of chromosomes each, merge, and then their nuclei merge to form the first diploid cell, a cell with two sets of chromosomes, the first zygote. Syngamy refers to gamete fusion and karyogamy to nucleus fusion. In most cases, syngamy is immediately followed by karyogamy. This fusion of two haploid cells results in the first diploid single-celled organism, which may then immediately divide back into two haploid cells. Conjugation, the second major kind of sexual phenomenon which occurs in the ciliates, involves the fusion of gametic nuclei instead of independent gamete cells. Initially, sex may be the fusion of two indistinguishable cells, isogamy, with gender, anisogamy, only evolving later, although possibly eukaryote cell fusion and gender is directly descended from prokaryote conjugation. All sexual species alternate between haploid and diploid. There are three main different types of sexual life cycles: haplontic, haplodiplontic, and diplontic. This begins the haplontic life cycle. In the entire life cycle, the only diploid cell is the zygote, and mitosis only occurs in the haploid phase. Most fungi and some protists, including algae, are haplontic. They have a multicellular haploid stage and no multicellular diploid stage. Plants and some algae are haplodiplontic. They make both a multicellular haploid and multicellular diploid organism. Animals are diplontic. They make a diploid multicellular organism and no multicellular haploid organism. Meiosis evolves. One-step meiosis, a single cell division of a diploid cell into two haploid cells. Meiosis, which looks similar to mitosis, is the process of cell division in sexually reproducing organisms that reduces the number of chromosomes in reproductive cells from diploid to haploid, leading to the production of gametes in animals and spores in plants. Without the reduction back to haploid, genomes would double in size with every generation. Gender in eukaryotes evolves. Anisogamy, sex, cell and nucleus fusion between two cells that are different in size or shape. Oogamy, a form of anisogamy, evolves in protists, sex between a flagellated gamete and an unflagellated gamete. Diploid cell fusion evolves. Gametogamy. Two-step meiosis evolves. Diploid DNA copies and then the cell divides twice into 4 haploid cells. Most protists divide by two-step meiosis, and one-step meiosis is rare. Many of the steps of meiosis closely resemble corresponding steps in mitosis. Meiosis, like mitosis, is preceded by the replication of chromosomes, but this single replication is followed not by 1 but 2 cell divisions, which results in 4 child cells instead of the 2 child cells of mitosis. Mitosis produces child cells that are genetically identical to their parent cells and each other, while meiosis produces cells that differ genetically from their parent cell and from each other. The eubacteria phylum Deinococcus thermus evolves, includes Thermus aquaticus, used in PCR, and Deinococcus radiodurans, which can survive long exposure to radiation. The eubacteria phylum Cyanobacteria evolves. Cyanobacteria are the only prokaryotes with oxygen-producing photosynthesis and are the ancestor of all eukaryote plastids, for example chloroplasts. Fossil evidence suggests that cyanobacteria existed as early as 3.8 billion years before now, but the genetic evidence places the origin of cyanobacteria here at 2.5 billion years before now. The eubacteria phylum Chloroflexi evolves, green non-sulfur bacteria. The Chloroflexi are filamentous bacteria that perform anoxygenic photosynthesis, the end of the Archean and start of the Proterozoic eon. The Proterozoic spans from 2,500 to 542 million years ago and represents 42% of Earth's history. Banded iron formation starts to appear in many places. Bacteria live on land. Chemoautotrophs oxidize sulfur or nitrogen to form sulfate or nitrate and therefore sulfuric or nitric acid, which then dissolves rocks. Start of a 200 million year ice age. The oldest red beds, iron oxide formed on land, began here and are also evidence of more free oxygen in the air of Earth. A parasitic bacterium closely related to Rickettsia prowazekii, an aerobic proteobacteria, is engulfed by an early eukaryotic cell. Over time, a symbiotic relationship evolves within the eukaryotic cell, an endosymbiosis, where the Rickettsia becomes mitochondria. Mitochondria are membrane-bound organelles found in the cytoplasm of almost all eukaryotic cells and are where cellular respiration occurs, producing most of the ATP in a eukaryotic cell. In eukaryotes, the mitochondria perform the citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation using oxygen to break down pyruvate from glycolysis into carbon dioxide and water and provide up to 36 ATP molecules. The earliest large filamentous fossil, Grippania. Grippania spiralis is about 10 centimeters long and is thought to be either a green alga or large cyanobacterium. If eukaryote, Grippania would be the earliest eukaryote fossil. Grippania may be like Acetabularia, a large single-celled green algae. The Grippania fossils have no blade analogous to a leaf or holdfast structures, but stretching implies that Grippania was a sessile organism connected to a surface. The end of the banded iron formation. The first homeobox genes evolve. These genes regulate the building of major body parts in algae, plants, fungi, and animals. For example, when a homeobox gene responsible for growing a mouse eye is added to the cell of a fruit fly embryo that is destined to be a leg, an extra fruit fly eye is built on the leg. The ancestor of all living eukaryotes divides into bicont and unicont descendants. Biconts lead to all chromalveolates, excavates, rhizaria, and plants. Uniconts lead to all amoebozoa, animals, and fungi. The protist phylum Amoebozoa evolves, amoebas and slime molds. The first feeding using pseudopods, a temporary projection of the cytoplasm. The amoebozoa include amoebas, both naked and testate, partially enclosed by a test or shell, and slime molds, and are characterized by pseudopods. Slime molds will diverge into 2 main branches, plasmodial slime molds and cellular slime molds. Colonialism, where cells form a colony, evolves for the first time in eukaryotes. Many cells that form colonies are apparently identical, but because each cell is exposed to a different environment, they transcribe different genes. The first plastids evolve. Cyanobacteria form plastids through endosymbiosis within a eukaryotic cell. Like mitochondria, these organelles copy themselves and are not made by the cell DNA. Plastids provide the eukaryotic cell with food from photosynthesis and gain protection by living within the cell. This is a primary plastid endosymbiosis, and so these plastids are surrounded by a double membrane. The inner wall of the plastid being that of the bacterium, the outer wall being that of the eukaryote. The first plant, ancestor of all green and red algae and land plants. This begins the plant kingdom. The first plant is probably unicellular, similar to the glaucophytes. The protists opisthokonts evolve. The ancestor of all fungi, choanoflagellates, and animals. The earliest extant plant, Glaucophyta. Glaucophytes are unicellular algae found in fresh water. Glaucophyta probably branched off the evolutionary tree before the divergence of red and green algae from one another. The plant phylum Chlorophyta evolves. Green algae, ancestor of volvox, sea lettuce, spirogyra, and stoneworts. The green algae are the most diverse group of algae on Earth today in terms of number of species, having at least 7,000 species. The first land plants most likely evolve from green algae. The plant phylum Rhodophyta evolves. Red algae. Rhodophyta are common and widespread unicellular and multicellular algae reaching up to 1 meter or 3 feet in length and are mostly free-living, but some are parasitic or symbiotic. The protists excavates evolve, the ancestor of the parabasalids and the diplomonads, which includes Giardia. Most of these species have an excavated ventral feeding groove and all lack mitochondria, which are thought to be lost secondarily. Filamentous multicellularity in eukaryotes evolves. In this organism, unlike single-cell eukaryotes, cells stay fastened together after cell division. Multicellularity seems to have arisen multiple times independently in eukaryotes, in fungi, animals, slime molds, and algae. Differentiation in a multicellular eukaryote evolves. In addition to gamete or spore cells, there are somatic cells. Unlike gamete cells, somatic cells are asexual, non-fusing. All cells of an organism are somatic cells except the sperm and egg cells, the cells from which they arise, gametocytes, and undifferentiated stem cells. Cell differentiation is how cells in a multicellular organism become specialized to perform specific functions in a variety of tissues and organs. Mitosis of diploid cells evolves. The haplodiplontic life cycle evolves in algae. Mitosis occurs in both haploid and diploid life stages. This is also known as the alteration of generations. Some algae and plants have a haplodiplontic life cycle, a life cycle where both diploid and haploid stages are multicellular. The multicellular haploid stage is called the gametophyte, and the multicellular diploid stage is called the sporophyte. A captured red alga through endosymbiosis becomes a plastid in the ancestor of all chromalveolates. This is a secondary plastid endosymbiosis where an algae cell is captured instead of a cyanobacterium, which results in a plastid with more than 2 membranes. The protists chromalveolates evolve, ancestor of the chromista, cryptophytes, haptophytes, and straminopoles, and alveolates. The earliest certain eukaryote fossils in eukaryote filamentous multicellularity, Rhodophyta, red algae fossils. These are also the earliest fossils of a eukaryote that can reproduce sexually and that has differentiated cells, a basal holdfast. The first fungi. This begins the fungi kingdom. Like animals, fungi are heterotrophic, unable to build structural materials by photosynthesis, and so must feed on other living things. Fungi live on organic material and are therefore generally parasitic, live or feed on another organism to the detriment of the host organism, or are saprophytic, live on dead or decaying organic matter. Some types of fungi, however, form symbioses with plants. Fungi may reproduce sexually or asexually and, like plants, show alternations in their life cycle. The protists alveolates, ancestor of all ciliates, apicomplexans, and dinoflagellates. These 3 protist phyla all have an alveolar membrane system made of flattened membrane-bound sacs called alveoli. The oldest extant fungi phylum, Microsporidia, evolves. Microsporidia or obligate survive only as intracellular parasites of eukaryotes, commonly infecting insects, crustaceans, and fishes. The protist phylum Dinoflagellata evolves. The dinoflagellates. Dinoflagellates are single-celled aquatic organisms that have 2 dissimilar flagella. Most are microscopic and marine. An important link in the food chain, dinoflagellates also bloom, which can produce luminescence seen in the sea. The excavates discicristates, the ancestor of protists which have mitochondria with discoidal, shaped like a disc, cristae, the folded inner membrane of a mitochondrion. The ancestor of euglenids, leishmanias, trympanosomes, and acracid slime molds. A eukaryote eye evolves, the first three-dimensional response to light. The earliest eye probably evolves from a plastid. The first proto-eye is a light-sensitive area in a unicellular eukaryote. Eukaryotes are the first organisms to evolve the ability to follow light direction in 3 dimensions in open water. The protists, Stromonopoles, also called heteroconts, evolve. Ancestor of all brown algae, golden algae, diatoms, and Oomycota. Almost all Stromonopoles have unique 3-part hairs on the flagella at some stage in the life cycle. The protists, Mesomycetozoa, evolve, also called drips. Mesomycetozoa are in the protist phylum Choanozoa, which includes the choanoflagellates, thought to be the ancestor of sponges. The protist phylum Oomycota evolves, ancestor of the oomycetes, water molds. The protists Rhizaria evolve, ancestor of all Radiolaria, Foraminifera, and Cercozoa. The fungi Zygomycota evolves, ancestor of the bread molds and pin molds. The protist phylum Ciliophora evolves, the ciliates, ancestor of the Paramecium. The Ciliophora are characterized by having numerous cilia which they use to move themselves. Most ciliates are unicellular. The protist phylum Apicomplexa evolves. Includes malaria and toxoplasmosis. Apicomplexans have a special cell organelle called the apical complex, which helps to invade the host cell. The protists choanoflagellates evolve. Choanoflagellates are the closest relatives to the animals and may be direct ancestors of sponges. There are about 140 species of choanoflagellates. Some are free-swimming, propelling themselves with a flagellum. Others are attached by a stalk, sometimes with several together in a colony. Choanoflagellates use their flagellum to drive water into the funnel where food particles like bacteria are trapped and engulfed. Multicellularity evolves in a free-moving protist. This allows larger free-moving organisms to evolve. This multicellularity is thought to be independently evolved and not related to the earlier filamentous multicellularity of prokaryotes like cyanobacteria and eukaryotes like algae. The diplontic life cycle evolves. This organism is predominantly diploid. Mitosis in the haploid phase does not occur. All animals are diplontic and descend from this multicellular organism. The first animal in the first metazoan, the sponge, evolves. This begins the animal kingdom in the phylum Porifera, the sponges. There are only 3 major kinds of metazoans: sponges, cnidarians, and bilaterians. The word porifera means pore-bearing in Latin, and water continuously flows through the pores in sponges. Metazoans are multicellular and have differentiation. Their cells perform different functions. Sponges have cells that form a body wall, cells that secrete the skeleton, contractile cells, cells that digest food, and other kinds of cell types. All sponge cells are totipotent and so are capable of regrowing a new sponge. In sponges, there is no distinction between germline and soma. Some sponges can live for over 1,000 years. Sponges have 2 layers, each a single cell thick. The outer surface is called the pinacoderm and is made of cells called pinacocytes. On the inner surface is the choanoderm, which is made of flagellated cells called choanocytes. Between these 2 thin cellular sheets is the jelly-like mesohyal, which may vary in thickness and plays vital roles in digestion, gamete production, secretion of skeleton, and transport of nutrients and waste products by special amoeboid cells. The male gonad, testis, or testicle evolves in a sponge. In sponges, sperm are contained in spermatic cysts, which are choanocyte chambers transformed by the formation of sperm, spermatogenesis, but ova are distributed throughout the mesohyal, or middle layer. Start of the 60 million year Varanger Ice Age. Cells that group as tissues that are arranged in layers evolve in metazoans. Unlike the porifera, in the Placozoa and all later metazoans, cells group as tissues. The metazoa phylum Placozoa evolves. Placozoans look like amoebas but are multicellular. The only known species is Trichoplax adherens. Trichoplax lives in the sea and feeds on single-celled organisms, mostly algae. There are only 4 cell types in Trichoplax compared to the more than 200 cell types in humans. Trichoplax has 2 main cell layers like a cnidarian or ctenophore. Between these 2 layers are a few contractile cells that are similar to muscle cells, however placozoans have no muscle or nerve cells. Trichoplax has the lowest content of DNA of any metazoan, about 2/3 that in sponges and only 10 times that of bacteria. The fungi Chytridiomycota evolves, includes all chytridiomycetes. The chytrids are primitive fungi and are mostly subprobic, feed on dead species, decomposing chitin and keratin. Many chytrids are aquatic, mostly found in freshwater, and some species are unicellular. The first nerve cell or neuron and nervous system evolves in the ancestor of the ctenophores and cnidarians. This leads to the first ganglion and brain. This is the earliest touch and sound detection and memory. As time continues in the evolution of the metazoans, the number of neurons increases while the size of neurons decreases, showing that more neurons and smaller neurons, similar to transistors in a computer, give an organism more memory and as a result a selective advantage in survival. Muscle cells evolve in the ancestor of the ctenophores and cnidarians. Both the earliest known muscle and nerve cells are found in ctenophores and cnidarians. A closable mouth evolves for the first time in the ancestor of all ctenophores and cnidarians. The female gonad, the first ovary, evolves in the ancestor of ctenophores and cnidarians. In cnidarians, gonads develop in the body wall or in the mesenteries, cavities created by folded tissue, by differentiation of interstitial cells, cells in the space between tissues. Cnidaria have no complex reproductive organs. The animal phylum Ctenophora evolves. Comb jellies. Like the cnidarians, the ctenophores are diploblastic. They have two embryonic germ layers, the ectoderm and the endoderm, which become the adult epidermis and gastrodermis, respectively. The middle mesenchyme, a watery gelatinous fluid, never produces the complex organs seen in triploblastic metazoa. The main body cavity of the ctenophores is also the digestive chamber, and they have a simple nerve net. Unlike cnidarians, ctenophores lack stinging cells, there is no alternation of generation in the life cycle, and ctenophores are never colonial. On the surface of the body are 8 equally spaced comb plates called teens. Each teen is composed of a band of cilia. The teens provide most of the movement for the ctenophores. Ctenophores are hermaphroditic. Ovaries and testes differentiate from the endoderm. The gametes are released through temporary gonopores and fertilization is external. The start of the Ediacaran period. A large increase in the evolutionary turnover rate of acrotarchs is thought to be the result of the evolution of the nervous system and gut in the eumetazoa, all Ctenophora, cnidaria, and bilateria. The animal phylum Cnidaria evolves, the ancestor of sea anemones, sea pens, corals, and jellyfish. Cnidaria also evolved the earliest animal eye. Cnidaria are primarily radially symmetrical animals with tentacles, have a single body cavity with only one opening to take in food and to release wastes, and have specialized stinging cells. Cnidarians have two alternate body plans, the polyp and the medusa. A sea anemone or hydra is a typical polyp, fixed to the ground with mouth on top. Corals are colonial marine polyps that secrete calcareous calcium carbonate skeletons, which they live inside of. The medusa form is upside down compared to the polyp form and is free swimming. A jellyfish has a typical medusa form, swimming through the open sea. Many cnidarians have both polyp and medusa forms in a single life cycle. Polyps often reproduce by budding. A new baby polyp clone grows on the side of the parent. When cnidaria reproduce sexually, sperm is released into the water and fertilization is usually external. Digestion in cnidarians starts in the gastrovascular cavity, but once the food is reduced to particles small enough to enter the digestive cells of the gastrodermis, digestion is completed inside the cell, intracellularly. Cnidarians have a nervous system which is a network without a centralized structure. They also have muscles which are contracted to propel them. Cnidarians see in black and white because their eyes have only one pigment. For color vision, the eye must have more than one pigment. The start of the Ediacaran soft-bodied invertebrate fossils. The sudden appearance of Ediacaran fossils may relate to the accumulation of free oxygen in the atmosphere and sea, which may permit an oxidative metabolism. Because the Ediacaran animals are soft-bodied, they are infrequently preserved. The animals bilaterians evolve, metazoans with two-sided symmetry. This is the first tripoblastic animal, an animal with a third embryonic layer, the mesoderm. This is also the earliest animal brain and memory. In most bilaterians, food enters in one end, the mouth, and waste exits at the opposite end, the anus. There is an advantage for sense organs like light, sound, touch, smell, and taste detection to be located on the head near the mouth to help with getting food. Unlike the diploblastic cnidarians and Ctenophora, bilaterians are triploblastic. A third embryonic layer, the mesoderm, lies between the ectoderm and the endoderm. This layer increases the options for the development of organs with specific functions. This begins the animal subkingdom Bilateria. The earliest extant bilaterian, Acelomorpha, ancestor of Acela flatworms and Nemerta dermatita. The Acelomorpha lack a digestive tract, anus, and coelom. Flatworms have no lungs or gills and breathe through their skin. Flatworms also have no circulating blood, and so their branched gut presumably transports nutrients to all parts of the body. An intestine evolves in a bilaterian. Since the gut of this organism has no anus, undigested food must be regurgitated through the mouth. The intestine is lined with a single layer of endodermal cells that perform some or all of the processes of digestion and absorption. A cylindrical gut, anus, and throughput of food evolves in a bilaterian. All bilaterally symmetrical metazoans except the phyla Acelomorpha and Platyhelminthes have a tubular gut with an anus, mouth, and throughput of food. The phyla Nemertea and Entoprocta are the earliest bilaterians with an anus. The genital pore, vagina, and uterus evolve in a bilaterian. The penis evolves in a bilaterian. The end of the Varanger Ice Age. The coelom evolves in a bilaterian. The coelom is a fluid-filled cavity that forms within the mesoderm and exists between the gut and body wall in most trypoblastic animals. The advantage of a coelom is that it allows the body wall and gut wall to act independently, and also that other organ systems can be developed in the fluid-filled space. In addition, the fluid in the cavity can act as a deformable skeleton. The first circulatory system evolves. Blood vessels and blood evolve in a bilaterian. The first blood cells. Cnidarians and flatworms are at most 2 sheets of tissue thick and so allow gas exchange and nutrient distribution by diffusion. But larger animals with thicker tissues require a circulatory system to distribute materials. The circulatory system transports molecules like gases, foods, and waste to and from individual cells. In bilaterians with circulatory systems, blood may be distributed by contractile vessels in the blood vessel walls and/or by hearts. The bilaterians' protostomes evolve, the ancestor of all ecdysozoa and Lophotrochozoa. The difference between protostomes and deuterostomes arises during embryonic development. In protostomes, the first indentation of the gastrula, an early stage of the embryo, develops into the mouth, and the second indentation develops into the anus. The reverse is true for the deuterostomes. The bilaterians' deuterostomes evolve, the ancestor of all echinoderms, hemichordates, and chordates. The first shell, or skeleton, evolves. The first known shell belongs to a group of ciliates called tintinids. Skeletons evolve independently in different groups of organisms. The bilaterians' Chaetognatha evolve, arrowworms. The earliest teeth evolve. Animals start to eat other animals. The evolution of teeth and animal predation starts an arms race that rapidly transforms ecosystems around the Earth. Teeth and shells evolve as advantages to survival. The deuterostome phylum Hemichordata evolves, the hemichordates, the ancestor of pterobranchs and acorn worms. Adult pterobranchs are sessile, faceting to solid structures, but the younger or larval form is free-swimming and is thought to have evolved into tunicates and then the first fish. The deuterostome phylum Chordata evolves. Chordates are a very large group that includes all tunicates, fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. Chordates get their name from the notochord, the cartilage rod that runs along the back of the animal, in the embryo if not in the adult. The ancestor of all chordates evolves upside down. Unlike earlier invertebrates who have a ventral nerve cord near the belly and a dorsal heart near the back, this ancestor and all later vertebrates have a dorsal nerve cord and a ventral heart. Chordates have 4 key characters: a notochord, a dorsal hollow nerve cord, gill slits, also called pharyngeal slits, and a muscular postanal tail. The notochord provides skeletal support through most of the length of the chordate and provides a firm but flexible structure from which attached muscles can contract. In the higher fishes, the notochord is surrounded and gradually replaced by segmental vertebrae. The earliest extant chordate tunicates evolve, also called sea squirts. The earliest animal shell or skeleton evolves. This is the earliest evidence of animals eating other animals, predation. This begins the appearance of small shelly fossils and deep burrows correlated with a decline in stromatolites, possibly from feeding. The earliest animal shells are made by tiny organisms with simple tube-like skeletons, such as Claudina and cynotubulites, in addition to sponge skeleton fossils. The shell of Claudina is made of calcium carbonate and possibly made by some kind of worm. Predatory boreholes have been found in Claudina shells. This is the oldest evidence of predation known. When animals begin to develop hard parts, their probability of preservation greatly improves. The protostomes ecdysozoa evolve. Ecdysozoa are animals that molt, lose their outer skin as they grow. This is the ancestor of roundworms and arthropods, which includes insects and crustaceans, also known as shellfish. The protostomes Lophotrochozoa evolve. Ancestor of rotifers, phoronids, brachiopods, entoprocs, bryozoans, platyhelminthes, gastrotrix, nemertea, mollusks, and annelids. The first fish evolves. The earliest extant fish, the chordates lancelets, also called amphioxus. This is also the first liver and kidney. The lancelet is different from a worm in not being cylindrical and swims like a fish using its muscles with side-to-side undulations. Lancelets are not vertebrates. They have only a nerve tube on the notochord and no brain other than a small swelling at the front end of the nerve tube. The gill slits of lancelets are primarily for filter feeding. Gas exchange, the absorption of oxygen and emission of carbon dioxide, mostly occurs across the external body surface. Lancelets have no heart, and blood is pumped around the body by contractions of the blood vessels. The ecdysozoa Aschelminthes evolves, the ancestor of the worms nematodes and priapulids. The Lophotrachozoa phylum Brachiopoda evolves, the brachiopods. The brachiopods are marine invertebrates that have bivalve dorsal and ventral shells enclosing a pair of tentacled, arm-like structures that are used to sweep minute food particles into their mouth. Segmentation evolves, body parts are repeated serially. The end of the Precambrian, the end of the Proterozoic and start of the Phanerozoic eon, the end of the Neoproterozoic and start of the Paleozoic era, and the end of the Ediacaran and start of the Cambrian period. The Cambrian radiation, or Cambrian explosion, the rapid diversification of multicellular animals between 542 and 530 million years ago that results in the appearance of many between 20 and 35 of the major phyla of animals. An increase of animals with shells. The Cambrian metazoan radiation may be the result of a major increase in atmospheric oxygen and animal predation. The Lophotrachozoa phylum Platyhelminthes evolves, flatworms. Platyhelminthes, which is Greek for flatworms, include free-living and parasitic acoelomate worms, worms with no coelom. They can reproduce sexually and also asexually by transverse fission, splitting in half. The protist phylum Radiolaria evolves. Radiolarians are protists found in the upper layers of all oceans, are mostly spherically symmetrical and known for their complex and beautiful tiny skeletons called tests, which are usually made of silica. The protist phylum Foraminifera evolves. Foraminifera are unicellular protists characterized by long, fine pseudopods that extend from a cytoplasmic body encased within a test or shell. The Lophotrachozoa phylum Nemertea evolves, ribbon worms. Nemertea are unsegmented worms with a coelom that live in marine, freshwater, and terrestrial environments. The ecdysozoa phylum Tardigrada evolves, tardigrades. Tardigrades are slow-moving microscopic invertebrates that live in water or damp moss with 4 body segments and 8 legs. The ecdysozoa phylum Onychophora evolves. Onychophorans are a transition between worms and arthropods. They have segmented worm-like bodies, but they also have jointed appendages, antennae, and shed their cuticle like arthropods do. The first heart evolves in bilaterians. Muscles for pumping blood and for maintaining adequate blood pressure can be divided into 3 groups. Contractile blood vessels, found in Nemerteans and annelids, osteate hearts, found in arthropods, and chambered hearts, found in mollusks and vertebrates. The Lophotrachozoa phylum Mollusca evolves, mollusks. The phylum Mollusca is the second largest animal phylum after the arthropods and is divided into 7 classes, 3 of which, Gastropoda, snails, Bivalvia, clams and mussels, and Cephalopoda, squids and octopuses, are of major importance. Early Cambrian mollusk fossils show the segmentation of the mollusk worm-like ancestor and have individual plates, which imply that the mollusk shell fused together over the course of millions of years. The Lophotrachozoa phylum Annelida evolves, segmented worms. Annelids are various worms or worm-like animals characterized by an elongated cylindrical segmented body and includes the earthworm and leech. The ecdysozoa phylum Arthropoda evolves, the arthropods. Arthropods can be compared to a segmented worm encased in a rigid exoskeleton. The phylum Arthropoda is the largest phylum in the animal kingdom. Arthropods include the trilobites, the crustaceans, shrimps, crabs, and lobsters, the myriapoda, centipedes and millipedes, the chelicerata, arachnids and horseshoe crabs, and the insects. All arthropods have a segmented body covered by an exoskeleton containing chitin, which serves as both armor and as a surface for muscle attachment. The chordata vertebrates evolve. This subphylum Vertebrata contains most fishes and all amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. The characteristic features of the vertebrata are a vertebral column or backbone and a cranium, which protect the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and major sense organs. This earliest vertebrate skeleton is made completely of cartilage. The extinct vertebrates, the conodonts, evolve. Conodonts have no lower jaw but have calcified teeth positioned under well-developed eyes. The vertebrates' jawless fishes evolve, Agnatha. The earliest extant jawless fishes, the hagfishes, evolve now. Hagfishes are eel-like scavengers. The arthropod subphylum Chelicerata evolves. 8 legs, ancestor of the horseshoe crabs, sea spiders, and the arachnids, mites, spiders, and scorpions. The earliest color vision evolves in arthropods. Vertebrates with color vision include some fishes and amphibians, many reptiles, and all birds, but only a few mammals, humans, and some other higher primates can see in color. The deuterostome phylum Echinodermata evolves. The echinoderms, the ancestor of the sea cucumbers, sea urchins, sand dollars, and starfishes. The arthropods trilobites evolve. Trilobites have a segmented body that is divided into 3 vertical lobes. There is a transition from the soft-bodied organisms to the clam-like shell organisms to the segmented calcite and chitin shells of the trilobites. Horseshoe crabs may descend from trilobites. The arthropods crustaceans evolve, the ancestor of all shrimps, crabs, lobsters, and barnacles. The arthropods myriapoda evolve, the ancestor of all centipedes and millipedes. The end of the Cambrian and start of the Ordovician period. The Ordovician radiation. During the Ordovician, the number of genera will quadruple. The extinct jawless fishes ostracoderms evolve. The ostracoderms are the first vertebrates to have paired appendages, an inner ear with 2 semicircular canals, and bone, although almost exclusively in the outer exoskeleton. The non-vascular plants evolve. Bryophyta, the ancestor of the liverworts, hornworts, and mosses. The bryophytes are the simplest land plants and reproduce with spores. Most are 2 to 5 centimeters or 1 to 2 inches tall and extremely tolerant of dry and freezing conditions. Plants live on land. The earliest fossil spores belonging to land plants. Plants conquer land before animals do, and like animals may move to land not by sea but by fresh water. The first animals live on land, the arthropods myriapoda, centipedes, and millipedes. The non-vascular plants hornworts evolve. The jawless fishes lampreys evolve. The non-vascular plants mosses evolve. Jawed vertebrates evolve, Gnathostomata. This large group includes all jawed fishes, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. The first vertebrate teeth. Jawed fishes have a skeleton made completely of cartilage. Only the teeth become ossified when mineral crystals, mostly calcium phosphate, become integrated into them. The jaw evolves from parts of the gill skeleton. The jawed fishes class Chondrichthyes evolves, cartilaginous fishes, ancestor of all sharks, rays, skates, and sawfishes. The earliest fungi on land. The ancestor of all terrestrial fungi, the Glomeromycota, Ascomycota, and Basidiomycota. The fungi phylum Glomeromycota evolves, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. The Glomeromycota are mutualistic symbionts that form a close association intracellularly between the fungus and the roots of plants. The end Ordovician mass extinction. This is caused by an ice age. This is the first of 5 mass extinctions in the Phanerozoic. The end of the Ordovician and the start of the Silurian period. The vascular plants evolve, the phylum Tracheophyta. Vascular plants have a specialized conducting system consisting mostly of phloem, food-conducting tissue, and xylem, water-conducting tissue, collectively called vascular tissue. The phloem transports sugar, and the xylem transports water and salts. Ferns, gymnosperms, and flowering plants are all vascular plants. In contrast to the non-vascular bryophytes, where the gametophyte is the dominant phase among vascular plants is the sporophyte. Because they have vascular tissues, these plants have true stems, leaves, and roots. The jawed fishes class Osteichthyes evolves. Bony fishes, the ancestor of the ray-finned, lobe-fin, and lungfishes. Bony fishes have a skeleton that is at least partly ossified or made of bone. The bony fishes are the ancestor of the tetrapods who will ultimately move onto land. The earliest bony fishes are the ray-finned fishes. The name ray is because their fins have a skeleton similar to a handheld fan. Most of the ray-finned fishes are known as teleosts, a very successful evolutionary line that exists in both salt and freshwater. The first lung evolves from the swim bladder in ray-finned fishes. Some teleosts still use their swim bladder for breathing out of water. Fishes that breathe with a lung evolve breathing through a completely different route than fishes that breathe air through their gill chamber. The jawed fishes lobe-fin fishes evolve. Lobe-fin fishes have a fleshy lobe at the base of each fin. The earliest extant lobe-fin fishes, the coelacanths, evolve now. The arthropod superclass Hexapoda evolves. Arthropods with 6 legs, 3 pairs, the ancestor of all insects. The closest relative of the hexapods is most likely the Branchiopoda, the brine shrimps. The Chelicerata class Arachnida evolves. The arachnids, the ancestor of all scorpions, spiders, mites, and ticks. The lobe-fin fishes, lungfishes evolve. The end of the Silurian and start of the Devonian period. The hexapod class Insecta evolves. The insects. The insects are the most diverse organisms known, having nearly 1 million named species, which is over half of all named species on Earth. The most primitive living insect order, Archaeonatha, the bristletails, evolves now. The insect order Zygentoma evolves. Silverfish. The largest fungi phylum Ascomycota evolves, the ancestor of yeasts, truffles, penicillium, and morels. The Ascomycota account for approximately 75% of all described fungi. The vascular plants ferns evolve, the ancestor of club mosses, ferns, and horsetails. Ferns are flowerless, seedless, vascular plants that have roots, stems, and fronds, the leaf-like part of a fern, and reproduce by spores. The cartilaginous fishes subclass Elasmobranchii evolves, the ancestor of sharks, dogfishes, skates, and rays. The green algae charophytes evolve, stoneworts. The earliest fungi lichen. A lichen is a fungus usually of the class Ascomycetes that grows symbiotically with algae and cyanobacteria, resulting in a composite organism that characteristically forms a crust-like or branching growth on rocks or tree trunks. Lichens have a planet-wide distribution and thrive in some of the Earth's harshest environments, such as polar regions, deserts, and high mountains. The cartilaginous fish's infraclass Selachii evolves. The ancestor of all sharks includes great white, hammerhead, mako, tiger, and nurse sharks. The cartilaginous fish's subclass Holocephali evolves, the ancestor of the chimeras, also called rabbit fishes or rat fishes. The arachnids, spiders, evolve. The first forests, the earliest large tree fossils. The first progymnosperms, tree-like plants like Archaeopteris. The first flying animal, an arthropod insect, the ancestor of all winged insects, Pterygota. The earliest extant winged insects are the Ephemeroptera, mayflies, and the Odonata, dragonflies and damselflies. Insect wings evolve only once, and all winged insects descend from the first winged insect. The development of wings may have helped early insects to escape predators and to move over larger distances to find new habitats. The jawed fish's superclass Tetrapoda evolves. The first tetrapods, vertebrates with 4 feet, evolve in freshwater. These are the first vertebrate limbs, arms and legs, and fingers. This is also the first amphibian, the ancestor of caecilians, frogs, toads, and salamanders. The late Devonian mass extinction, caused by an ice age. 70% of all species go extinct. This includes 3 of 5 trilobite orders, 90% of brachiopod genera, and a major loss of reefs. The first vertebrates live on land, an amphibian. The second largest fungi phylum Basidiomycota evolves, the ancestor of many mushrooms. Button, chanterelle, crimini, inaki, fly agaric, oyster, porcino, portabella, psilocybe, puffball, shiitake, wood ear, rusts, and club fungi. The Basidiomycota phylum contains 37% of the described species of fungi, and all produce basidia, which are the cells on which sexual spores are produced. The Neoptera, folding wing insects, evolve. A mechanism to fold the wings against the body after landing has a selective advantage by making the wings less conspicuous, awkward, and susceptible to breakage. The Neoptera are a very successful lineage and are the ancestors of all higher orders of insects. The end of the Devonian and start of the Carboniferous period. The first seed plant evolves, the ancestor of all seed plants. The earliest fossil seed is from a seed fern, pteridosperm. Fossils indicate that the first seed evolves from an enclosing ring of vegetative lobes that fuse together. A seed can be described as an integumented megasporangium. In the most primitive vascular plants, the spores are all the same size, but eventually gender evolves, producing small male microspores and larger female megaspores. Then individual female megaspores are enclosed by a ring of vegetative lobes which form an integument or cover. Hearing in amphibians adapts to sounds transmitted through the air. This is the beginning of vertebrates making vocal sounds. The ray-finned fishes, sturgeons, and paddlefish evolve. The Neoptera dictyoptera evolve, the ancestor of cockroaches, termites, and mantises. The first hard-shell egg. The tetrapods amniota evolve, the ancestor of all reptiles, mammals, and birds, and the first hard-shell egg. The hard-shell egg is waterproof. This is the start of vertebrate internal fertilization because on land the egg cannot be fertilized as most fishes and amphibians do by a male swimming near the eggs and spraying them with sperm. Amniote males and females must copulate so that the sperm can reach the eggs inside the female. All living amniotes lay hard-shelled eggs except most mammals and some snakes and lizards where egg-laying has been replaced by live birth. The eggshell of amniotes may be flexible like the eggs of many turtles and lizards, or mineralized and hard like the eggs of birds, crocodiles, and many tortoises. The amniota divide into the Sauropsida and the Synapsida. The Sauropsids have two major lineages, the Parareptilia, turtles, and the Eureptilia, dinosaurs, crocodiles, and birds. The Synapsids also have two major lineages, the Pelycosaurs, which are sail-backed amniotes, and the Therapsids, which are mammal-like amniotes. The Synapsids Pelycosauria evolve, the ancestor of Edaphosaurus and Dimetrodon. The most notable feature in some species of pelycosaur is a broad sail along the back. The earliest extant amphibians, caecilians, evolve. The seed plants gymnosperms evolve. Gymnosperms are the most primitive extant seed plants and ancestor of all cycads, ginkgos, and the conifers. The most primitive extant gymnosperms, the cycads, evolve now. Gymnosperm is Greek for naked seed. A gymnosperm reproduces by a seed that is in direct contact with the environment, as opposed to an angiosperm, a flowering plant whose seeds are enclosed by mature ovaries or fruits. The Neoptera order Orthoptera evolves, the ancestor of crickets, grasshoppers, locusts, and walking sticks. The Sauropsid class Reptilia evolves, the reptiles, the ancestor of all turtles, crocodiles, pterosaurs, dinosaurs, and birds. The class Reptilia is a group of air-breathing vertebrates that have internal fertilization and scales covering part or all of their body. All reptiles are cold-blooded except for birds and possibly some or all pterosaurs and dinosaurs. The gymnosperms Pinophyta evolve. The ancestor of the conifers includes pine, fir, spruce, redwood, cedar, juniper, hemlock, larch, yew, and cypress. The Neoptera Paraneoptera evolve. The ancestor of bark lice, true lice, thrips, and the Hemiptera. The Hemiptera have mouthparts adapted for piercing and sucking and include cicadas, aphids, and true bugs such as bedbugs and stink bugs. The Neoptera Holometabula evolve. Holometabolous insects. Insects that undergo complete metamorphosis. The ancestor of beetles, bees, true flies, and butterflies. The holometabolous insects account for nearly 85% of all insects. The holometabula are insects that have complete metamorphosis or holometabolous development. Unlike hemimetabolous insects in which the immature structures, legs, eyes, antennae, etc. must also serve the adults, holometabolous insects have a morphologically reduced larval stage and acquire a completely new body during the pupal stage. The amphibians Anura evolve, the ancestor of all frogs and toads. The Stromonopolis Chrysophyta evolve, golden algae, the end of the Carboniferous and start of the Permian period. The Holometabula order Coleoptera evolves, the ancestor of the beetles. Coleoptera is the largest order of all organisms known, containing 350,000 named species, 40% of all the insects. Well-known beetles include ladybugs, fireflies, dung beetles, Japanese beetles, weevils, and scarabs. Gymnosperms, ginkgos. The Holometabula order Hymenoptera evolves, the ancestor of all bees, ants, and wasps. The synapsid therapsids evolve, cynodonts. The therapsids evolved from pelycosaurs and largely replaced them for a time as the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. The legs of therapsids are more directly positioned under the weight of their body, which results in a more efficient mode of movement. The Stromonopolis phaeophyta evolve. The ancestor of all brown algae includes many seaweeds like the giant kelps. Note that brown algae are not plants, but are protists. The Stromonopolis diatoms evolve. Diatoms are microscopic unicellular or colonial algae having cell walls of silica consisting of two interlocking symmetrical valves. The earliest endothermic or warm-blooded and hair-growing animal, a therapsid. Endothermy is the physiological maintenance by a body of a constant temperature independent of the external environmental temperature. Hair for insulation is correlated to endothermy. Both birds and mammals are endothermic, also called warm-blooded, as opposed to other vertebrates like amphibians and crocodiles, which are ectothermic or cold-blooded and cannot internally generate heat. Endothermy allows birds and mammals to maintain a high and relatively constant body temperature even at rest during a wide range of external environmental conditions. The Holometabula order Diptera evolves, true flies, having a single pair of wings, the ancestor of the mosquito, gnat, deerfly, horsefly, fruit fly, Drosophila, and housefly. The largest mass extinction of history, the end Permian mass extinction. 82% of all genera are observed extinct. The Permian-Triassic extinction event is the Earth's most severe extinction event, with up to 96% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species becoming extinct. It is the only known mass extinction of insects. the end of the Paleozoic and start of the Mesozoic era, and the end of the Permian and start of the Triassic period. The supercontinent Pangaea forms. The gymnosperms natales evolve, thought to be the closest living gymnosperm relatives of the angiosperms. The protist phylum Haptophyta evolves, the coccolithophores. Most haptophytes are coccolithophores, unicellular flagellated marine protists with calcified plates or coccoliths embedded in their cell walls. The reptiles dinosaurs evolve. Dinosaurs divide into two major lines, the ornithischians, bird-hipped dinosaurs, and the saurischians, lizard-hipped dinosaurs. The saurischian dinosaurs split into two major lines, the Sauropoda morpha and the Theropoda. The Sauropoda morphs are divided into prosauropods, and sauropods are mostly plant-eating and include the large, long-necked dinosaurs like Apatosaurus. The theropod dinosaurs are bipedal and carnivorous and include Allosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, and Velociraptor. All birds descend from a theropod ancestor. The synapsids mammals evolve. The first mammary gland. Mammals are warm-blooded vertebrates that have 4 limbs, except for some aquatic species. The female has mammary glands, which secrete milk for the nourishment of the young after birth. In the majority of mammals, the body is partially or entirely covered with hair. The ray-finned fishes, teleost fishes, evolve. Teleosts are a large group of fishes with bony skeletons, including most common fishes. The most primitive extant reptiles, the testudines, evolve, the ancestor of all turtles, tortoises, and terrapins. The turtle shell evolves from broadened ribs. The reptiles, tuataras, evolve. The first flying vertebrate, the reptiles pterosaurs, evolve. Flight in pterosaurs, birds, and bats evolves independently. Pterosaurs actively fly, contracting their wing muscles to flap, as opposed to only glide. The reptiles iguania evolve, the ancestor of iguanas, chameleons, and spiny lizards. The reptiles scleroglossa evolve, the ancestor of snakes, skinks, and geckos. The earliest extant teleosts, bony tongues, evolve. The end Triassic mass extinction. 53% of all genera are observed extinct. Many terrestrial vertebrates and large amphibians go extinct. The end of the Triassic and start of the Jurassic period. The ornithischians Thyreophora evolve, the ancestor of the armored ankylosaurs and the plated stegosaurs. Wasps evolve. The teleosts eels and tarpons evolve. The reptiles Crocodilia evolve, the ancestor of crocodiles, alligators, and caimans. The saurischian sauropods evolve, the ancestor of the large, long-necked dinosaurs like Apatosaurus, Brachiosaurus, and Diplodocus. The ornithischian ornithopoda evolve, the duck-billed dinosaurs, ancestor of the hadrosaurs. The teleosts herrings and anchovies evolve. The supercontinent Pangaea splits into Laurasia and Gondwana. The northern part, Laurasia, will form North America and Europe. The southern part, Gondwana, will form South America and Africa. The holometabolo order Lepidoptera evolves, the ancestor of moths, butterflies, and caterpillars. The earliest extant mammals, the mammal order Monotremata, evolves, the monotremes. Monotremes are an order of primitive egg-laying mammals restricted to Australia, Tasmania, and New Guinea. The monotremes consist of only the platypus and 2 species of echidna. Monotreme means single hole in Greek. Like birds and reptiles, monotremes have a single opening, the cloaca, for the passage of liquid and solid wastes, the transfer of sperm, and in the female, the laying of eggs. After hatching, young cling to the belly of the mother. Monotremes have no nipples, but milk is secreted for the young by mammary glands on the belly of the mother through openings in the mother's skin. Monotremes are also the most primitive extant warm-blooded and hair-growing species. The teleosts carp, minnows, and piranhas evolve. The teleosts salmon, trout, and pike evolve. The amphibians salamanders evolve. Salamanders are able to regenerate a lost limb or tail by cells in the damaged area changing back to slightly less mature versions. The cartilaginous fishes Batoidea evolve, the ancestor of all rays, skates, and sawfishes. Stegosaurus, an armored plant-eating thyreophoran dinosaur, lives around this time. The teleosts lightfish and dragonfish evolve. Lightfish are characterized by luminescent organs on the undersides of their body. The theropods birds evolve. The first feather. Fossils of theropod dinosaurs from China indicate that feathers may have originally evolved on non-flying reptiles for insulation or courting and not for flight. At least one known feathered dinosaur can probably glide, which suggests that flapping flight evolves as an extension of gliding from trees. Birds have highly developed color vision. The seed plant's angiosperms evolve, the first flowering plant. Almost all grains, beans, nuts, fruits, vegetables, herbs, and spices come from plants with flowers. Much of our clothing comes from flowering plants too. For example, cotton and linen are made from fibers of flowering plants, as are rope and burlap. Many commercial dyes and drugs also come from flowering plants. Angiosperms represent approximately 80% of all the known green plants now living. The angiosperms are vascular seed plants in which the ovule or egg is fertilized and develops into a seed in an enclosed hollow ovary. The ovary is usually enclosed in a flower, the part of the angiosperm that contains the male or female reproductive organs or both. The fruit is the ovary of a plant which encloses seeds. The end of the Jurassic and start of the Cretaceous period. The earliest extant angiosperm, Ambarella. The angiosperms Nymphaeales evolve. The water lilies. The Ornithischian ceratopsian dinosaurs evolve. The ancestor of Triceratops. Ceratopsian dinosaurs are plant-eating dinosaurs. Later ceratopsians have massive heads armed with a sharp beak, long horns, and a large sheet of bone that grows from the back of the skull. The mammals marsupials evolve. The first nipple and breast. Marsupium means pouch in Latin. Marsupials are born as tiny embryos and crawl through their mother's fur into the pouch where they clamp their mouths to a nipple. The other main group of mammals are called placentals because they feed their embryos using a placenta, which allows the baby to be born much later. The pouch is like an external womb. The birds Enantiornithes evolve. The angiosperms Magnoliids evolve, the ancestor of nutmeg, avocado, sassafras, cinnamon, black and white pepper, camphor, bay or laurel tree, and magnolia. The angiosperms Eudicots evolve, the largest lineage of flowers. The two main groups of the eudicots are the rosids and the asterids. Eudicots are also called tricolpates, which refers to the structure of the pollen. The birds Hesper ornithiformes evolve. The teleosts perch, seahorses, flying fish, pufferfish, and barracuda evolve. The teleosts cod and anglerfish evolve. The mammals Eutheria evolve. Placental mammals. The Eutheria are mammals that have a placenta. The placenta is an organ that forms in the uterus to aid in the exchange of food and wastes between the blood of the mother and the fetus through an umbilical cord. Placental mammals include all living mammals except marsupials and monotremes. The placenta allows for a longer developmental period within the womb, which may give the placentals a selective advantage. The bird beak evolves. The birds Neornithes evolve. Modern birds, the most recent common ancestor of all extant birds. Bees evolve. Ants evolve. The angiosperms monocotyledons or monocots evolve. Flowering plants that have a single cotyledon or seed leaf in the embryo. Monocots are the second largest lineage of flowers after the eudicots and include lilies, palms, orchids, and grasses. The two main orders of monocots are base monocots and camelinids. The basal eudicots evolve, the ancestor of the buttercup, clematis, poppy, macadamia, lotus, and sycamore. The core eudicots evolve, the ancestor of the cactus, caper, buckwheat, rhubarb, Venus flytrap, Old World pitcher plants, beet, quinoa, spinach, and grape plants. The Eutheria superorder Afrotheria evolves, the ancestor of all elephants, manatees, and aardvarks. Afrotheres originate in Africa and are the earliest extant placental mammals. The birds ratites evolve, the ancestor of the ostrich, emu, cassowary, and kiwi. The Eutheria superorder Xenarthra evolves in South America. The xenarthrens, the ancestor of sloths, anteaters, and armadillos. The angiosperms rosids evolve. Basal rosids include the pomegranate, clove, guava, allspice, and eucalyptus. The rosids order Fabales evolves, the ancestor of beans, pea, peanut, soy, and lentil. The monocots base monocots evolve, the ancestor of vanilla, orchid, asparagus, onion, garlic, agave, aloe, and lily. The monocots camelinids evolve, the ancestor of palms, coconut, corn, rice, barley, oat, wheat, rye, sugarcane, bamboo, grass, pineapple, papyrus, turmeric, banana, and ginger. The basal asterids order Ericales evolves, the ancestor of the kiwi fruit, ebony, persimmon, blueberry, cranberry, Brazil nut, New World pitcher plant, and tea. The asterids order Apiales evolves, the ancestor of dill, celery, cilantro, carrot, parsnip, fennel, parsley, and ivy. The asterids order Asterales evolves, the ancestor of tarragon, daisy, artichoke, sunflower, lettuce, and dandelion. The rosids order Malpighiales evolves, the ancestor of coca, rubber tree, cassava, poinsettia, willow, poplar, and aspen. The Rosids order Brassicales evolves, the ancestor of horseradish, mustard, cabbage, broccoli, radish, and papaya. The Rosids order Rosales evolves, the ancestor of hemp, hop, jackfruit, fig, strawberry, rose, raspberry, apple, pear, plum, cherry, peach, and almond. The Asterids order Gentianales evolves, the ancestor of oleander and coffee. The Asterids order Solanales evolves, the ancestor of bell pepper, tomato, tobacco, potato, and eggplant. The Rosids order Cucurbitales evolves, the ancestor of melon, cucumber, pumpkin, squash, and zucchini. The Rosids order Phagales evolves, the ancestor of many flowers that produce edible nuts. For example, birch, hazel, chestnut, beech, oak, walnut, pecan, and hickory. The bird order Galliformes evolves, the ancestor of the chicken, turkey, pheasant, peacock, and quail. The bird order Anseriformes evolves, the ancestor of ducks, geese, and swans. The Eutheria superorder Laurasiatheres evolves. The Laurasiatheres are a major line of placental mammals that originate in the northern continent Laurasia. The Eutheria superorder Euarchontoglires evolves, the ancestor of all rabbits, rodents, tree shrews, colugos, and the primates. The Rocky Mountains start to form. The Rosids order Malvales evolves, the ancestor of okra, marshmallow, durian, cotton, balsa, and cacao. The Rosids order Sapindales evolves, the ancestor of the maple, lychee, mahogany, cashew, mango, pistachio, and the citrus trees, orange, lemon, and grapefruit. The ornithopods hadrosaurs evolve, the duck-billed dinosaurs. The Laurasiatheres order Insectivora evolves, the ancestor of shrews, moles, and hedgehogs. The theropods dromaeosaurs evolve, raptors. The earliest extant marsupials, the order Didelphomorphia evolves, New World opossums. The Afrotheres aardvarks evolve. The Asterids order Lamiales evolves, the ancestor of many spices. Mint, basil, marjoram, oregano, rosemary, sage, savory, thyme, teak, sesame, olive, ash, lilac, and jasmine. The marsupials bandicoots and bilbies evolve in Australia. Two of the largest meat-eating dinosaurs known are common, both theropods. Tyrannosaurus rex is the top predator in North America, and Giganotosaurus is the top predator in South America. The Thyreophorine ankylosaurs evolve, the shieldback and or clubbed tail dinosaurs, the most heavily armored land animals known. The marine reptiles mosasaurs evolve. The bird order Podicipediformes evolves, grebes. The Euarchontoglires order Lagomorpha evolves, the ancestor of rabbits, hares, and pikas. Rabbits, like rodents, also have very prominent gnawing teeth at the front. The Euarchontoglires, tree shrews, and colugos evolve. The largest pterosaur and largest flying animal ever known, Quetzalcoatlus evolves. Quetzalcoatlus has a wingspan of 12 meters or 40 feet. The end Cretaceous mass extinction. 47% of all genera are observed extinct. Made extinct are 60% of plant species and all dinosaurs, mosasaurs, pterosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pliosaurs. A comet or meteor collides with the Earth in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, and huge amounts of lava erupt from India. No large animals survive on land, in the air, or in the sea. The end of the Mesozoic and start of the Cenozoic era, and the end of the Cretaceous and start of the Tertiary period. The start of the rapid diversification of mammals. The bird order Gruiformes evolves, the ancestor of cranes, rails, and bustards. Marsupial moles evolve. The marsupials Tasmanian devil and numbat evolve. The marsupial order Diprotodontia evolves, the ancestor of wombats, kangaroos, possums, and koalas. The Euarchontoglires order Rodentia evolves, rodents. The rodents Myomorpha evolve, the ancestor of rats, mice, gerbils, foals, lemmings, and hamsters. The Euarchontoglires order primates evolve, most likely in Africa or the Indian subcontinent. The first opposable thumb. The primates contain more than 300 species, including monkeys, apes, and humans. The bird order Strigiformes evolves, owls. The Laurasiatheres order Carnivora evolves, the ancestor of cats, dogs, bears, weasels, hyenas, seals, and walruses. The primates tarsiers evolve. The bird order Apodiformes evolves, the ancestor of hummingbirds and swifts. The bird order Pisciformes evolves, the ancestor of woodpeckers and toucans. The bird order Passeriformes evolves, Perching songbirds. This order includes many common birds, for example crows, jays, sparrows, warblers, mockingbirds, wrens, robins, orioles, bluebirds, vireos, larks, swallows, and finches. More than half of all species of birds are passerines. The Afrotheres order Proboscidea evolves, the ancestor of mammoths, mastodons, and elephants. The Afrotheres manatee and dugong evolve. The Laurasiatheres Cetartiodactyla evolve. The ancestor of all Artiodactyla, also called even-toed ungulates, camels, pigs, ruminants, includes deer, giraffe, cattle, sheep, and antelope, hippos, and all cetacea, whales and dolphins. Hippos are the closest living land relatives of the whales and dolphins. The Laurasiatheres Perissodactyla evolve, also called odd-toed ungulates, the ancestor of all horses, tapirs, and rhinos. The rodents beavers. The rodents dormouse, mountain beaver, squirrel, and marmot evolve. The bird order Psittaciformes evolves. Parrots. Horses evolve. The ruminants giraffes evolve, the last common ancestor between hippos with dolphins and whales. The earliest marine mammal and earliest whale, Himaliocetus. The Laurasiatheres order Chiroptera evolves, the ancestor of fruit bats and echolocating bats. The rodents Old World porcupines evolve. The Himalayan mountains start to form. The early whale Ambulocetus evolves. The first camels. The first rhinos. The bird order Falconiformes evolves, the ancestor of falcons, hawks, eagles, and Old World vultures. The rodents New World porcupines, guinea pigs, agoutis, and capybaras evolve. The primates New World monkeys evolve, the ancestor of the sakis, spider, howler, and squirrel monkeys, capuchins, and tamarins. The ancestor of all New World monkeys probably originates in Africa, but all surviving descendants now live in the Americas, which suggests that a small group of New World monkeys got across the early Atlantic Ocean to South America, perhaps by rafting on fallen trees over a chain of islands. Dogs evolve. The bird order Cuculiformes evolves, the ancestor of cuckoos and roadrunners. The Xenothrens ground sloths evolve. Toothed and baleen whale lines split. Toothed whales include dolphins, sperm, and killer whales. Baleen whales include blue, humpback, and gray whales. Cats evolve. The primates true lemurs evolve. The first pigs evolve. The primates Old World monkeys evolve, the ancestor of the macaques, baboons, mandrills, proboscis, and colobus monkeys. This is also the last common ancestor of the Old World monkeys and the hominoids, which includes apes and humans. The first deer evolves. The ancestor of all hominoids, gibbons and hominids, loses its tail. The monotreme echidna evolves. The monotreme duck-billed platypus evolves. The hominoid proconsul evolves in East Africa. The ancestor of all hominids may move over land from Africa into Eurasia. The hominoids gibbons evolve in Southeast Asia. The first kangaroos evolve. The first bovids evolve, hollow-horned ruminants, oxen, antelopes, sheep, cattle, and goats. The earliest extant hominids, orangutans, evolve in Southeast Asia. The ancestor of all gorillas, chimpanzees, and archaic humans may move over land from Eurasia back into Africa. The hominids gorillas evolve in Africa. The hominids chimpanzees evolve in Africa. This is the last common ancestor of chimpanzees and humans. The hominid Ardipithecus evolves, the earliest bipedal primate. Hominids walking upright on two legs away from a life in the trees may signal that they have become the top of the food chain on land as the result of using weapons. The hominid Australopithecus evolves.